It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to Rico Brogna. We have reached episode number 604. We got a lot to cover on today's Rico Brogna. It definitely feels like inevitably David Stearns is going to make multiple trades during this offseason. Certainly a lot of rumors, a lot of smoke. So today we'll do a deep dive on David Stearns' brief history at making trades while president of the New York Mets. I thought about roping in his Brewer days, but the reality is I just don't think it matters. I know that one of the critiques that David is facing right now is that he's trying to run the Mets like the Brewers, but he really isn't. I mean, the Brewers were a major small market team. And so as frustrated as we are with Alonso going to Baltimore and some of these free agent negotiations, it really isn't like Milwaukee. So breaking down the Josh Hader trade or the Christian Yelich trade, it's very irrelevant in my opinion. So we'll go through the trades he's made with the Mets over the next 2.5 years. We'll do that coming up. We'll touch on how Pete Alonso ended up making the right decision back in the summer of 2023. And we're going to read a few of your emails. I mentioned that after Diaz and Alonso left, we were bombarded with tons of emails to the Rico B at Gmail. Is that the address? The Rico B at gmail.com. Yes, that is the email address. And so I will try to incorporate some of your great emails over the next few episodes. One reminder, it is now official. When we do the Rico Rewatchable to try to get all Met fans in a good mood, we are going to rewatch Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. For those that have seen it, it will make you smile. And for those that haven't, like that's almost going to Mecca if you're a Met fan. Like we have to watch Game 6 of the 86 World Series. You've seen highlights, but have you ever sat down and watched the entire game? And I'll geek it up even more. I think you should print out a scorecard and score the game. I'll be doing it. So join me. That is a Rico Rewatchable. Watch that game during the holidays. That's your homework assignment if you want to take one. And then in the first week of January, we'll do an entire episode dedicated to breaking down, responding, recapping, playing clips from Game 6 of the 86 World Series. All right, let's get to the modern Mets. The Tyler Rogers news actually did bother me a little bit. Tyler Rogers a few days ago signed with the Blue Jays on a 3-year, $37 million deal. Would I have projected that Rogers was going to get that? Probably not. So I get that's a lot of money. I mean, you're talking about over $10 million a year. But one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Tyler Rogers back, despite his kind of mixed record with the Mets the brief time he was here, is the reliability that he brings coming out of the bullpen. And that's one of the issues that I think the Mets need to add to this bullpen, and that is an arm that you can trust. It's one of my concerns around Pete Fairbanks because of his long injury history. Tyler Rogers doesn't throw hard. We know that. He gets a lot of soft contact. He doesn't strike a lot of guys out. We saw the negatives of that in his brief time with the Mets, but he's got a rubber arm. He takes the baseball every day. And I think when you look at this Met bullpen and the certainties and then the uncertainties, Tyler Rogers would have been a really nice certainty to add to this bullpen. Am I surprised that David Stearns didn't want to go 3 years, $37 million? How the hell could we be surprised? The lesson we are learning about Stearns' free agent approach, unless your name is Soto and Yamamoto, is we're not going to stretch away from the way we value you. So I think if the Mets got Tyler Rogers, and I don't know if they actually made him an offer. I mean, that's the game of the Met offseason. We don't make offers because we weren't even going to go close to that. But I would assume the Mets probably would have been in the range of 2 years, $18 million, something like that. So a few $1 million less than what he ultimately got with Toronto, and not a third year and a possibility at a fourth year. But it's disappointing. When you look at the rest of the free agent class of arms out of the bullpen, and I was doing it earlier, Pete Fairbanks is clearly the number one guy. And then you got a lot of questions. I mean, Sir Anthony Dominguez is okay. David Robertson is probably not going to sign until the middle of the season. You could go with Luke Weaver as a kind of a project coming off of his collapse the final few months of the year. I'm intrigued by, what the guy in Texas who had a really good year. I'm forgetting. I remember we talked about him during the Sean Armstrong. Sean Armstrong is a guy who could be good on a 1 or a 2 year deal if you can get him. But a lot of these arms, I mean, Paul Sewald and Tommy Kahnle and Hunter Harvey and Pierce Johnson and Chris Martin, it is a major fall off, I think, from the reliability of a guy like Tyler Rogers. So clearly the best arm available is Pete Fairbanks. I think he's going to cost the Mets at least $12 million a year, probably more. And so you're running into the same question. Will David Stearns be able to get just a tad bit uncomfortable to give himself another good arm out of the bullpen? The trade market is certainly an option. We talked about it on the last Rico, if you missed it, episode 603, Mason Miller, and the possibilities of the Mets going after Mason Miller and all the conversations between the Padres and the Mets. There is so much smoke between the Padres and the Mets that I would almost be surprised if there wasn't a trade. I think the question is, how big does that trade go? I think we could assume it's not going to go big enough to get to Lindor and Tatis, but I mean big enough in terms of Jonah Tong and Nick Pivetta and Mason Miller, or does it end up becoming very small? Does it end up becoming, Luis Angel Acuna for Ramon Laureano? Something of that nature. But if I had to guess right now, there's so much smoke between the Mets and the Padres, and they do fit each other well, that some kind of deal will go down. But that's another way they can improve their bullpen. We've heard Trevor McGill as a guy connected to Freddie Peralta if they make a trade with Milwaukee. But right now, they need another bullpen arm. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And not being able to re-sign Tyler Rogers is disappointing. We were ranking at the beginning of the offseason all the Mets free agents and which guys we wanted back. Obviously, Alonso and Diaz were 1-2. But if you listen to that episode, I was very high on bringing Tyler Rogers back. So what else is new? I mean, I'm disappointed. I mean, isn't that the story of the offseason? Not just for me, but for most people. And speaking of the offseason, I want to get to Pete Alonso. Because sometimes decisions are made and we like to judge them. We judge them in real time. But unfortunately, you got to give things a lot of time just to see if the decision was right. I want to go back to June of 2023. And we didn't even know this at the time. But Billy Epler and Steve Cohen made an offer to Pete Alonso and his agent that was a 7-year, $158 million offer. It was an extension that would have covered his final year of arbitration. So that would have been 2024. And then 6 years of free agency. He ends up turning that down. He ends up playing through with arbitration in 2024. He ends up signing the 1-year deal to come back. It was a 3-year deal, but essentially a 1-year deal to come back. And then he signs the 5-year deal. So the 7-year, $158 million deal that he turned down is now covered on a 7-year, $207 million deal. He ended up making about $40 million more by turning that deal down. And that wasn't always obvious, because the story I heard is that Steve Cohen told him, you're going to regret this. You made a big mistake. And I think for a brief time, it looked like he did make a big mistake. You get that protection of 7 years. You make pretty good money. But considering what ended up happening in 2024 with the season that he had, and then follow that up with a free agency in which there just was not a robust market for him, it looked a year ago as if Pete Alonso made a dumb decision, that the big meathead screwed up by saying no to that offer by the New York Mets. And ultimately, and a credit goes to really Pete more than I'm going to give it to Scott Boras, I think it's about betting on yourself. And it's about performing, and it's about putting yourself back in the marketplace and finding one team desperate enough to give you close to what you're looking for. I don't begrudge the Mets for trying to sign him in June of 2023. I appreciate that, because I think life would have been a lot easier for us as fans if he had signed that contract. Though I love to play the alternate universe game. We'll have a few alternate universe Ricos maybe during the offseason, but I'll briefly give you this alternate universe where Pete Alonso says yes. Back in June of 2023, when Billy Epler and Steve Cohen made that offer of 7 years, $158 million, Pete Alonso said, you know what? Cool. I'm going to take that. Not only do I want to be a Met for life, but I like the protection. If he took that contract And I think a lot of people listening know where I'm going with this with David Stearns. And obviously, David takes over. He runs the team. Pete Alonso would have been traded probably right now. If I have to play the alternate history game on Alonso accepting that deal, he signs it, finishes out 23 despite the disappointment. 2024, everything, let's assume, plays out the same way. I'm going to take the leap of faith that Alonso's performances are all the same. Everything plays out the same way. 2024 plays out the same way. And I would think in the offseason, after acquiring Juan Soto, they would figure, let's run it back one more year from Pete. And we're probably sitting here right now in the middle of December talking about how they traded Pete Alonso. The Tom Seaver trade of our lifetime. So even if Pete, in this alternate universe, made what would have been the wrong decision to say yes on that contract, there'd be even more blood on David Stearns' hands because he probably would have traded him to the Orioles or to whatever team. Because think about it, the length would have been the same. He still would have been signed for the next 5 years, even if it wasn't at that high of an average annual salary. So I thought about that over the last couple of days. I also thought this. Actually, this was from my text chat. One of my buddies, one of my Met fan friends, who said if the Mets were willing to go to 3 years on Pete this year, which is just conjecture because they never made an offer, then what if last year they just made him a 4-year offer? And this is all under David Stearns. If they make him a 4-year offer last year with no opt-outs, does he say yes? And the answer is probably. He probably would have taken the security of a 4-year, $118 million deal. But the Mets settled on a 3-year deal. He had the opt-out. The rest is history. I don't want to belabor it anymore, but I'm belaboring it. I apologize. Let's get to some of your emails, and then we will dive deep into David Stearns' trade history. We'll kick it off with Eric. Eric writes, before I start, I just want to say I'm extremely pissed off about Diaz and Alonso, and the fact that I cracked the Stearns code doesn't make me feel any better about this. But here it is. The obvious part is that Stearns acknowledged this group wasn't winning together and they weren't one piece away, which is why we aren't going for it. The second part that they probably won't say out loud is that they won't be championship competitive for at least a couple of years. Call it 3 years for the sake of this discussion. So what does that mean? Nimmo, is he what we want for a championship run 3 years from now? Hell no. He probably won't be able to walk. Alonso, he would be entering the bad part of his 5-year deal, so he isn't what you want at that time either. Edwin Diaz, same answer. The best Diaz is most likely in the past, and he's now in a contract year. So what does that mean for who else we chase in free agency this year using that same formula? Kyle Tucker probably makes sense, as he'll be in his prime 3 years from now. Trading for Tarek Skubal? Absolutely not. Why give up the farm for a 1-year rental before our championship window a few years out? Sign Skubal as a free agent next year, and now we're talking. This 3-year time period will also allow the young arms and bats to come up and be in their permanent positions. Mets baseball 2028 is going to be lit. 26 and 27 will probably be scrappy and contend for a playoff spot, but we won't be fully ready for a run. Be prepared for a year that won't be called a rebuild in 2026, but it absolutely is. P.S. You never read one of my emails, so let's try something new. Well, there you go, Eric. You made it. You made it to one of the emails. Thank you very much for the email. I don't know if their thinking is we want to win 3 years from now. I don't think that's the overriding philosophy. I think that they looked at the value of Nimmo's contract and said, let's get out of it now. Because if we don't get out of it now, it's going to get worse. And there are a few players who are like that. I was talking about this with Fernando Tatis Jr., a guy that every Met fan wants to acquire. If you look at Fernando Tatis Jr.'s contract moving forward, and I'll pull it up right now just so I don't forget it or get it wrong in any regard, you'll see my point that right now he's a hot commodity. Right now, the Mets would want to trade for him. Everybody would want to trade for him. But in 3 years, it ain't going to be pretty. And I'll show you why. He's 27 years old, and he's about to make $20 million. Frickin' steal, right? 2027, it goes up to $25.7 million. Okay, still not bad. Following year, he's a 29-year-old making 25.7. All good. So for the next 3 years, great value. When Tatis turns 30 in 2029, his salary jumps to $36.7 million, and it stays at that number for the next 6 years until he's 35 years old. So if the Padres, and obviously they are going through an ownership transition, so that impacts this, but if the Padres are thinking, we don't want to be a part of this contract for the duration of it, well, don't wait, because if you try to trade him in 2029 and 2030, it's going to be viewed as more of a negative contract than what it is right now, where teams would be falling all over themselves to get them. So I think in the case of Brandon Nimmo, he is still a productive player. He is still only 32 years old. And so even though they didn't get a lot back, I mean, they got back a bad contract too, in a way, in Marcus Semien. I think David Stearns knew if I try to move him 2 years from now, I'll get nothing back, or it'll be far worse than what he was able to do. I think this is about value. Same thing with Pete Alonso. They just did not value him on a long-term deal. So I don't know if it's as simple as our plan is 3 years from now. They want to win. And I know that sounds, well, that's crazy, Evan. They want to win. They just let these really good players go. I think they want to win under their plan, under their vision of not giving out long-term contracts that turn bad. I don't agree with this, by the way. I think sometimes you have to give out bad contracts. I've made this point a lot over the last few days, and I read this quote from Andrew Friedman, and that pisses me off because the last thing I want to do is give Andrew Friedman a lot of credit, but of course he runs the LA Dodgers. And his quote, to paraphrase, was, if you're not willing to get uncomfortable in free agency, you will finish in third place for that free agent. And that is basically the point I've made for 5 days. This is an email that Glenn will be very happy I'm reading. Glenn writes, Evan, I really enjoy your show and listen most of the time, but I get nauseous whenever I hear you say Luis Arise. You're nuts if you think he is any kind of answer for the Mets. Where does he play? First base? His OAA at first was -9. Do you know who else had a -9 OAA? Pete Alonso. All Arise does is it's singles. You want to dedicate the DH position to a singles hitter? You say that McNeil isn't as good as Arise and can't do what he does? What was Arise's on base against lefties last year? Anyhow, I don't have to go on any longer, Glenn, because I think the move for Jorge Polanco eliminates any potential fit for Luis Arise. So the good news is you're not going to get nauseous anymore. I don't have to defend my Arise points anymore. We don't have to argue about it because I think signing Polanco makes it a non-fit. So we're all good. Manny writes, Evan, please tell me you understand this. Between the lines of Edwin Diaz's explanation for leaving the Mets, he's really saying, I'm tired of being the adult in a dysfunctional household. I want competent leadership, a plan that lasts longer than a press conference, and teammates who expect October, not apologies for missing it. I want an organization where preparation replaces excuses, pressure is shared, and chaos isn't branded as passion. Translation for future Mets. If you value stability, clarity, and winning, pack light. Boy, Manny, you read a lot out of Edwin Diaz's press conference. You know what I read out of Edwin Diaz's press conference? The Dodgers are the best organization in baseball by a mile. That doesn't make everyone else dysfunctional. It just makes the Dodgers the team you would want to play on. Why wouldn't you? They've won back-to-back championships, and even before that, they are the biggest guarantee to make the postseason. So you took a lot out of that. I'm not sure if that's the case. And one last email before we get to the Stearns breakdown, also about the Dodgers. Shane writes, first-time emailer, I know the talk was always the Mets want to become the Dodgers, and I think we have to remember how the Dodgers started. They let Corey Seager, a homegrown fan favorite, walk. Then they let Trey Turner walk. They didn't play elite-level prices for above-average talent. They waited, and then they traded for elite players like Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman. So letting Alonso walk is fine. However, if we want to follow the Dodgers and there's one elite hitter this year and none next year, you have to sign Kyle Tucker this year and then Skubal next year. And boom, you're only paying top dollar to top players. I'll hang up and listen. I do agree, Shane, that that's what I think their philosophy is. Because when you look at Soto, elite level player, they were very aggressive on. Yamamoto, uniquely young as a starting pitcher, they were aggressive on him, even if they didn't get him. And you look at all other free agents, there doesn't seem to be that same aggressiveness. But you touched on it. Next year's free agency outside of Tarek Skubal is light. In fact, I was going through the position players just to say who is the best position player available in free agency next year. I couldn't even come up with one. Like, there really isn't a top-level guy. So you say Kyle Tucker. There is no indication the Mets are in on Kyle Tucker. So I don't think they're doing what you're describing and what the Dodgers did years ago, which is letting popular homegrown guys that they deemed only as good walk away for these elite-level players. Soto was last year, so if you count that as part of it, sure. Francisco Lindor trading for him and signing him, that was 5 years ago now, if you want to count that. But I don't see it in this free agent market. And certainly next year doesn't have it. All right, let's dive into David Stearns. He has been the team president of the New York Mets since he was hired after the 2023 season. As you recall, late in that season, as it was mercifully ending, David Stearns was taking over. And before ever talking to Buck Showalter, they fired Buck Showalter. He took over. They hired Carlos Mendoza. He had his very first offseason. And so David Stearns has now had 2 full offseasons, this being his third. We are going to go through every single trade he has made. Let's start off with the first one he made. And Hoff, you tell me after we go through the trade how you would grade the trade. Is this an A trade, a B trade, a D trade, an F trade? I think that is very, very fair. And remember, for Hoff, for me, and for everybody listening, take your emotions about how you feel about David Stearns and throw it away. We are being fair graders right now. We are not thinking about Pete Alonso or thinking about Edwin Diaz or thinking about his smile or thinking about anything. I mean, we're thinking about something. We're thinking about the trade. So let's start off with the first one he made. This was back on December 18th, 2023. He purchased Yohan Ramirez from the Chicago White Sox. That was the first of the Syracuse shuttle. And of course, Yohan Ramirez has a couple of small moments in Met history, little tiny ones, pitching out of the bullpen. Look, when you just give up money to acquire somebody and they can come in and eat up some valuable innings, my default answer on an acquisition like that is a C. It's not bad, it's not good, and no one remembers it. So we'll start off with that minor transaction by giving him a nice little C.
I'll give him a little C with you. It doesn't move the needle, let's put it that way.
I got a bad one. I got a very underrated bad trade by David Stearns, and you decide how pissed we should be. On December 6th, 2023, this actually does go down as his first trade. It was a week and a half before Yohan Ramirez. The New York Mets claimed Justin Slayton in the Rule 5 draft and then immediately traded him to the Boston Red Sox for Ryan Ammons. Now, the reason I bring this trade up is Justin Slayton has been a solid bullpen arm for the last 2 seasons. And they had him. It would have been a Rule 5 scenario, so he was going to have to stay on the roster the entire year, and then immediately gave him away. So, look, I think sometimes we have to grade on a curve. Like this one is to me, this is a D. This is a D move. Slayton had a really good year in 2024 with Boston, not as good in 2025, but he's been a major league reliever for 2 years, and they gave him away for a minor leaguer I haven't heard of. That's a D move, but luckily it doesn't kill you because of the fact that if we're grading it on a scale, it's, it doesn't count that much against you.
Yeah, the reason why I give it an F is because if you're David Stearns and you know how you use bullpen arms, that you basically just recycle, you try to have to bring them down to the minors, all that stuff. And the Rule 5 draft is they have to be on the major league roster the entire season. There's no point of taking a Rule 5 guy for him. Am I right?
I wouldn't say there's no point, because if the guy can be impressive and pitch well early on, Obviously, you do kind of feel pressure for the guy to be on your roster the entire year because he has to, or you have to offer him back to your own team. But I wouldn't say there's no point. Like Justin Slayton pitched well enough with Boston that year where he would have stayed on the roster the entire year. I do want to be fair. The guy they got back, Ryan Ammons, is still in the Mets farm system. And out of the bullpen last year for Brooklyn, pitched to a 2.92 ERA. And out of the bullpen with Brooklyn, that was his only stop, pitched to a 2.92 ERA. So he is a 25-year-old relief pitcher who you never know. Maybe 2 years from now, Ryan Ammons is going to help this team. So it's a temporary F-off because it could turn out to be like an A- a few years from now.
Right. F with a box next to it with a question mark on it, like a Super Mario Brothers.
Absolutely. The other trade he made, and this was the last trade of the 23-24 offseason, was a significant one. He traded Coleman Crowe, who they got from Texas a year earlier, to Milwaukee for Tyrone Taylor and Adrian Hauser. Obviously, Adrian Hauser was a disaster. That did not work. But Tyrone Taylor is still here, and I think most of us like him as far as Coleman Crowe is concerned right now. Last year with the Brewers, he made 10 starts in Double-A, pitched well, only 2 starts at Triple-A, has not gotten back to the major leagues, has not gotten to the major leagues. So jury's still out on the piece they gave up, but this one is an A- because despite Hauser being an absolute loss, Tyrone Taylor's been a serviceable player. He's had some clutch hits. He plays good defense. There's going to be a role for him. He's been a nice piece for this team for the last 2, now going on 3 seasons.
Yeah, I'll give it a B, only because in 2024, his role was what it was supposed to be. It wasn't the everyday outfielder. He was just kind of like a 4th outfielder. Last year, it brought the stock down because he was the everyday outfielder. That's not good enough. He's not that guy.
Right, but that's not a negative towards the trade. That's a negative towards not filling the role better. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, honestly, until Coleman Crowe proves something, which could happen. I mean, that's the jury is always going to be out on trades until the whole story is written. But unless Coleman Crowe does something at the major league level, they turned a minor league pitcher into a solid 4th outfielder.
Hey, you know what? They turned Clay Holmes into a starting pitcher. So you're right. There you go. They nailed it.
Now let's jump into the 2024 regular season. This may be the best move he made. I'm telling you right now. When we're all done, you may say this is the best trade. It was May 31st, 2024. It was not ballyhooed. The New York Mets purchased with cash Luis Torrens from the New York Yankees. And at the time, it was, who cares? What does it mean? No big deal. And obviously, Torrens came up. He contributed. He not only had a couple of big hits, it was his defense. And really, the play that jumps out at me from the 2024 season was only a few weeks later. They purchased him on May 31st. I think it was about 7 days later, he made the play in London. The 2-2-3 double play that ended that game against the Philadelphia Phillies. For me, that's one of my personal favorite moments of the year, the turning point of 2024. And obviously in 2025, every time there were injuries, he filled in with Alvarez going down. His defense was ridiculous, automatic throwing guys out at second, again, would mix in clutch hits. As some may recall, when we did our gradings for the 2025 season, Luis Torrens was the one guy who got an A. So obviously this is maybe David Stearns' finest hour, purchasing Luis Torrens from the Yankees. That is an A trade.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of time that he's played, what he's done, I will grant you the A and agree with you on that. I can't fight on that.
Thank you. Let's get to the rest of the trade deadline because those were the many trades he made of 2024. Another purchase, so not giving up players, occurred on July 9th. He purchased Phil Maton from the Tampa Bay Rays. That's another like B+ move. I almost want to give him an A only because there were no players involved. But remember this about Phil Maton. He pitched to a 2.51 ERA and made 31 appearances over the final 2 months of the season. He did have some great moments in the playoffs, obviously. Was not good in the postseason, giving up 4 home runs in 6 1/3 innings, but they needed him to get there. And when you make the playoffs via tiebreakers, there's always going to be a lot of little things that help you get there. If he doesn't purchase Phil Maton from the Tampa Bay Rays, the OMG Mets don't make the postseason. So that is, I'll call it an A- move, purchasing Phil Maton.
Yeah, I was going to go straight A because I feel like he was they used him like Tyler Rogers, to be fair, in 2025. They used him like that in 2024. That was their Tyler Rogers, and he was effective. And again, like you said, they could not make the playoffs without him. Now, it does make me feel, though, the amount of times he pitched, it does make me feel like, wow, Adam Ottavino was right. Was it Ottavino or Trevor May that said they basically burned their arms out? It was Ottavino, right?
Adam Ottavino.
Yeah. I think he was right.
They needed to burn his arm out. I mean, like, it's a postseason race. What do you want him to do?
No, I get it. Hey, listen, thank God for him.
The other trade the Mets would make for relievers would feature Rylan Thomas going to the Seattle Mariners for Ryan Stanek. I do want to point out that Rylan Thomas made the major leagues last year with Seattle. He got into 3 games, but look at these numbers at Tacoma last year. He hit .325 with 7 home runs, 78 RBIs, 35 stolen bases, and he only struck out 32 times. So I don't know if this guy's ever going to stick at the major league level, but he's a left-hand hitting outfielder who never strikes out and put up massive numbers last year in Tacoma. So this could be bad. This could be something that reeks, but I have to admit in the moment, Ryan Stanek was helpful, not during the regular season, but in the postseason. I think by the time the playoffs ended, Ryan Stanek was probably their second most reliable reliever. So you're trying to win. Even if Rylan Thomas turns into a really good player in Seattle, I think we have to give this one like a B-ish kind of move, even with the potential of it being a disaster down the road.
Well, I give it an A- because the potential, I'm not there yet. I don't care about the potential. Like up until you actually do it, prospects mean absolutely nothing to me. I give them the A- because the regular season, whatever, but the playoffs, he was so huge. And I feel like he has that mentality of, I can give up a home run or I can give up a base hit. It doesn't make a difference to me. I'm just going to go out there and still do what I'm supposed to do. Problem is that sometimes what he's supposed to do, it doesn't work out because he's not effective. But overall, in the playoffs last year, for last year's purposes, definitely A-.
2 days later, he acquired Jesse Winker for Tyler Stewart. Tyler Stewart made a couple of starts for the Nationals last year, 25 years old, not much of a prospect. Again, jury's out on what he turns into. But we know what Jesse Winker did. Jesse Winker fit right into the OMG Mets. He had clutch hits. He had the walk-off home run against the Orioles. He had some big moments in the postseason. That, for the purposes of the trade deadline, that's an A trade. That's an absolute A. Think about some of the big moments he was a part of. The decision to re-sign him is not connected. Same thing with Ryan Stanek. I mean, remember, they were rentals, and the Mets decided, unlike with Phil Maton, who they let go, they decided to keep those players. Obviously, Winker, you almost forget he was on the Mets last year, but that was a really good move bringing Jesse Winker in. I remember liking it at the time mostly because he couldn't beat the Mets anymore. I think after he hit that home run on July 4th, I was like, just acquire this guy so he doesn't have to be a pain in our ass.
Yeah, the thing about Winker, too, was I think everyone had that vibe of like, that's the guy the Mets need to focus on and go get, and they got him. So because of that, like the fans wanted him. And again, I know you said take the emotional side out of it, but there is that element of the fans were screaming, go get Jesse Winker, go get Jesse Winker. They got him, and he was effective. I think it was an A+ all around.
They then would acquire Paul Blackburn from the Oakland Athletics for Cade Morris, who is still in the A system. He's a young pitcher, not much of a prospect, was in Double-A last year. Blackburn did not work here. And it didn't work because he got hurt. He couldn't stay healthy. He made 5 starts and then could not contribute. And then in 2025, it was the same thing. He was supposed to be a part of the pitching depth of this team, and that was not a free agent keep move. They acquired Blackburn with 2 years of team control, the remainder of 24 and 2025. I thought it was a low-risk move because, again, they did not give up much in this Cade Morris, but Blackburn did not pitch well here. He ended up finishing his career with the Mets making 9 starts and a 6.00 ERA. So didn't work. I didn't just
That's
didn't
an
work.
F.
What can you do?
That's an F. You can't make it up. F.
Yeah, I'll be generous and give him a D minus.
Oh, okay.
That same day, they acquired Huascar Brazoban from the Miami Marlins for Wilfredo Lara. And Brazoban, this is what I like about acquiring guys who have another year of team control. And David hasn't always done that. I mean, you just heard it with Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton, and obviously we'll get to the trades from 2025 where none of them had team control. You give yourself 2 bites at the apple when you acquire a guy that you have team control over, because Huascar Brazoban did not have a great impact on the 2024 team. Like, he didn't really help. He ended up in the minor leagues. He also had bad moments. When I think of Huascar Brazoban, I'm thinking of the following year, 2025. And look, he may have an impact in 2026. So I think that worked out. The guy they gave up is Wilfredo Lara, who is still very, very young. He's a 21-year-old middle infielder who last year was playing at rookie ball and single A and hit 186. So not worried, at least for now. But he is 21 years old, so I guess keep it in the back of your mind. But I would say that trade kind of has gotten better as time went by. I thought he was a really solid arm out of the bullpen in 2025 after not being good at the trade deadline. So I'd give that one a nice B. I think that's a B move bringing in Brazoban.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on the B part because I've always had a soft spot for him. I thought that with the pitching lab, I felt like they could work with him because he does have, I don't want to say elite pitching. He does have elite stuff at times, and they just needed to like fine tune it a little bit. And again, you saw him get sent down in 2024, but last year, like you said, he was very effective in many different games, and coming in at different roles, being an opener, giving you length here and there. I mean, I still like him, and I think that he could be valuable. So B.
Now we move on to the offseason of 24 to 25, and you'll notice there haven't been a lot of offseason trades. In fact, there was only one offseason trade David Stearns pulled off during that offseason, and that was when they acquired Jose Siri from the Tampa Bay Rays for relief pitcher Eric Orsi on November 19th, 2024. This is very bad, not only because for the obvious, which is that Jose Siri was a complete non-factor, but Eric Orsi actually contributed to the Tampa Bay Rays bullpen as a 27-year-old reliever, 41 innings, pitched to a 3.02 ERA. It was a little lucky, walked a bunch of guys, had a very high whip, but nevertheless, he was a breathing human being that contributed out of the Tampa Bay Ray bullpen. And Jose Siri got hurt after getting off to that abysmal start. You almost forgot he wasn't on the team. Then when he came back, forget his offense. Forget how bad that was. The defensive miscues in September in the middle of a pennant race, he ended up finishing his Met career 2 for 32 with 1 RBI and an .063 batting average. So it doesn't even matter what Eric Orsi was or is or can be. This was a colossal waste. This is an F trade.
You can't go F minus? That's not allowed?
I mean, you want to throw a minus in there? Fine.
I think you have to. I don't know if it's legal, but I'm throwing it in there because it was just so bad on every single aspect of it. Again, don't know what Orsi's going to turn into, but we know that Siri was crap.
Honorable mention, they did acquire Alexander Canario early on in spring training on February 5th, 2025. He became a hot name for us for a month on the Rico, talking about him making the team over Starling Marte. He did not. He ended up getting released. He ended up with the Pirates, was on the Pirates for a while, did not have a big offensive year, so it doesn't feel like it was much of a miss. So I almost don't even grade a trade like that. Then you've got acquiring guys early in 2025 who would just join the Syracuse train, like Jose Castillo from the Arizona Diamondbacks and Justin Garza from the San Francisco Giants. Justin Garza, I would give it incomplete. Jose Castillo, I would almost give like a nice solid C to. I mentioned it earlier. Whenever you acquire somebody who can at least contribute to the Syracuse shuttle and actually have some good moments, remember Jose Castillo did win a I'm the man now star of the series. Like, he was able to pull that off. So I give a solid C in purchasing Jose Castillo.
I just because whatever Castillo, part of that shuffle. I'll join the C party, but it's nothing too impressive.
All right, now let's get to the D party because we're about to hit the trade deadline of 2025. These are the 4 other trades. And what I cannot get over, how many guys the Mets traded at the trade deadline, and who knows what any of them are going to be, jury is out, but they ended up trading 3,
12. They said 12 guys.
9, I got 11, but maybe you're right, 12. 11 or 12 guys were traded for 4 players, all of them free agents, all of them signed with other teams, and 3 of the 4 sucked for when they were here. So you don't even get the Phil Maton, they pitched well. We'll start with Cedric Mullins. They gave up 3 guys. They gave up Raymond Gomez, who I remember reading about early in the season because he threw really hard, Anthony Nunez, and Chandler Marsh for Cedric Mullins. Cedric Mullins was the definition of a net negative. Definition of a net negative. Where him being here made things worse. They were better off just riding it out with Jeff McNeil playing center field and Tyrone Taylor playing center field than dealing with Cedric Mullins. I don't know what any of those guys are going to be. I think that all of these trades have the potential to be unmitigated disasters. Instead, they were just disasters for now, in that they acquired guys and they failed. They didn't help them make the postseason. The Ryan Helsley trade saw them send back Jesus Baez, Frank Elisalt, and Nate Dome. Same thing. I mean, Ryan Helsley was a net negative. He was. He came here. He blew so many saves upon first coming over. He did finish relatively strong, but 3 human breathing baseball players were sent away for him. If they even make the major leagues and contribute, it's a waste and a disaster. Next up was Tyler Rogers. And this one, I remember when they traded for Rogers, I was excited because of who he is and his reliability, like we talked about earlier in the pod. But I was surprised how much they gave up. They gave up Drew Gilbert, who we need to calm down about. He ended up hitting 180 for the Giants after being called up. Could they use another outfielder right now in the mix with the youth that they have? Sure. Yeah, I mean, Drew Gilbert would just be in the mix. That's how we would view him. Behind Carson Benj and Jet Williams, but there. But let's not act like Drew Gilbert became PCA. He hasn't done that yet. Jose Budo, that's the one that hurts because I think Jose Budo would have been just a nice arm to have in the bullpen going into 2026. And Blade Tidwell, who, jury is still out. Tidwell had his moments at the major league level, went to AAA with the Giants. Jury is still out on what he can be. I liked Tyler Rogers. He was not perfect. He did pitch to some bad luck. I wanted him back. So obviously I liked him enough to want him back. But those 3 guys are all major leaguers. They aren't just prospects. They've all at least gotten to the major league level. And then the trade for Gregory Soto, I have written down as Cameron Foster and Wellington Arcerena. Soto started off well, finished badly. Now he's in Pittsburgh. I'm going to go straight up. Mullins is an F. Helsley's an F. Rogers is like a B-. Nah, I gotta go worse than that because of the fact that the 3 guys are major leaguers. I'll go C on the Rogers deal. And with Soto, I'll go D+.
The only reason why I'm going to change Rogers to a full-on B is because he did what he was supposed to do. He pitched almost every game. I mean, that's basically what they had him there for. He wasn't effective. They didn't use it properly. Again, but that was more on Mendoza than on Rogers. You know, they put Rogers in when bases are loaded, and, you know, all of a sudden he pitches the contact, a soft hit goes by, and run scores in the game. So, and the you know, he blows the game. But that's not on him. That's on Mendoza's managing. Yes, I understand Buto. I understand Tidwell. I understand Gilbert. But like you said, Gilbert's nothing right now. Tidwell, we don't know. I'm not going to fight that. Like, when you're in a pennant race, the Tyler Rogers was a good trade because he was at least a little bit effective.
And those are the trades. Obviously, Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien. Can't forget that. But in terms of the trades that we can judge with some results, those are the trades David Stearns has made. So we are waiting for blockbusters. The Brandon Nimmo one, I think, qualifies this offseason. And I think we're going to see more, but we do not have a deep track record on the David Stearns trade front. I would say that the best deal he made was the Luis Torrens trade. I'd say the second best deal he made was the Torrens trade. I would go Torrens trade 1, Tyrone Taylor trade 2, Huascar Brazaban trade number 3. And that's telling you that nothing has been that impactful so far on the David Stearns trade front. But those are the trades that he's made. Obviously, free agency is a different story. We'll get into that on a different pod. So he's got a lot to prove.
Yeah, but think about what he's doing, though. He's trying to find the same way he's looking with free agency, where he's going to go for the cheaper, maybe not as good, but maybe I could find a diamond in a rough here. That's what he's trying to do. He's always trying to find something that's like, I'm going to go for this guy and we'll test it out. We'll see if that works. It's at some point in time, he's just got to say, you know what? I'm putting it all on the table and I'm getting the best guy. I'm not going to go for the second fiddle.
Well, we're going to get big trades. I do have a feeling. I don't know if we're going to like them. I don't know if they're going to be excited Ricos or pissed off Ricos or everyone's fighting with each other Ricos. But I think the trade market is going to be big. And I think we'll have a much greater sample size to discuss real soon. Let's get to a few more of your emails at thericob@gmail.com. Jay in Manhattan writes, let's say a genie came out of a lamp and gave us 2 options. Option number 1, Pete and Edwin are gone. Stearns does whatever the plan is, but I guarantee you the Mets make the playoffs. Can't guarantee anything after that, but you don't have to sweat in September. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is no guarantee of playoffs. Pete and Edwin are back, and we filled in around them. You go into the season, and you see what happens. I think most Met fans would pick option 2, and I would be more likely to buy tickets for option 2. And I get it. It's not rational, but that's fandom. And David Stearns doesn't understand that. I guess they don't teach that at Harvard. You know what's funny, Jay? I think I would take option 1. If you're telling me I'm definitely in the postseason, look, I think that this week has been rough. And there's a lot of emotion when you lose players that you watched grow up for 6-7 years. And there's a lot of emotion when you go through the same song and dance of, oh my God, it's another person who won't finish his career with the Mets. And you go back to the laundry list of Tom Seaver, Darryl Strawberry, Jose Reyes, Edgardo Alfonso, Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry. That's tough. But at the end of the day, we all want to win. You know, Joe, and if you didn't hear him on Saturday, and he was texting me earlier today, he is beyond pissed off, which I get. I am too. We all are. But I know this, even though Joe certainly doesn't feel this way now, and I don't think a lot of us do, if they win, if they are successful, we'll all be happy. So when you give me 2 options, and one of the options is you're guaranteed to be in the postseason, sign me up for that. One other point from Jay. Jay writes, I'm not old enough to remember the Midnight Massacre, but these last few days have to have been something close to that. We need a name for this 24-hour period where David Stearns ripped out the hearts of Met fans and stomped all over them. I'm going with December debacle. What do you think? Well, Jay, I'll tell you this. First of all, the Midnight Massacre was the Mets trading Tom Seaver. And I think that the nickname for this, because it's a 48-hour period, right? So is it 48 hours of doom? Is it? I'm actually going to ChatGPT to ask to find out, like, what should we call it? What should it be called? You know, what's funny about the Midnight Massacre, and I guess I have to ask my dad about this and Joe B, is that the Midnight Massacre was Tom Seaver and Dave Kingman. They traded Tom Seaver, and then they traded Dave Kingman. Or at least they traded each other, both of those players, right around the same time. Even though Dave Kingman put up big numbers, I never viewed him as a beloved Met. So when you think back to the phrase Midnight Massacre, I always just think of Tom Seaver, even though there was another trade that night that made it the massacre. But in the case of Diaz and Alonso, neither guy is Seaver, but I would put both guys above Dave Kingman. So I don't know if that makes it worse or not, but I always found that odd because everything I always hear about Dave Kingman all these years later is negative stuff. And I don't really get fond memories of Dave Kingman despite all the power he hit for. Anyhow, Chat GPT to answer the question. And we'll take your emails on it too. What would be a nickname? What should we nickname the 48-hour period where the Mets lost both Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso? This is the problem with AI, or it's actually the beauty of AI. Let's see if AI comes up with a good answer. Oof, that stretch deserves a name. Here are some nickname ideas grouped by a vibe so you can pick what fits your brand of Mets pain. 48 Hours of Hurt, the Flushing Fallout, the Queen's Catastrophe, the Blue and Orange Blackout, the Double Wham Mets, 2 days, 2 gut punches, the Polar Bear Plunge, the Grimace Reversal, the Weekend That Broke Queens, the Ides of Flushing, Diaz and Despair, LOL Mets, the 48-hour cut, the Lost 48. Not bad. We'll take your emails on those ideas. Maybe we'll read some on our next Rico. How would you nickname the 48 hours of pain where the Mets lost both Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso? The Rico B at gmail.com. And I remind you, our Rico Rewatchable will be Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. So if you have time during the holiday season with your families, watch the game. And in the first week of January, that's when we'll have our special Rico where we break down everything from Game 6 of the 86 World Series.
And if you need to find the link, I have it in the YouTube page. I have it in the podcast page. So it is there for you if you need to find the link for the rewatch.
Good work, my friend. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, downloading, and hanging out on another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.